Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind, and today I'm going to introduce you all to Jack Mardack, who's the co founder and chief impact officer at Oyster. Before starting Oyster, Jack was the head of marketing or growth at Eventbrite, Prezi, Vonage, and more. And for those of you that don't know, Oyster is a global employment platform that empowers companies to hire, pay, and care for their global teams and enables people centric hiring anywhere in the world with reliable, compliant contracts, payroll, and great local benefits and perks. The company was last publicly valued at more than $1 billion after having raised a $150 million Series C in August 2023. Thanks for coming on the show, Jack.
It is a great pleasure. Thank you, Rick.
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
So can you just walk us through your career? I mean, you've just been
Sure.
working as a high-powered executive at some of these
Not
large,
always.
well-known tech companies.
There's definitely an arc there, and I'm sometimes asked to comment on kind of key learnings from that. And one of the things that I would share is I think it's okay not to know what you want to be when you grow up. By that I mean I didn't have a very conscious career plan or kind of a very, very specific sense of what I wanted to do. And I think a lot of folks feel insecure when they don't have that kind of clarity. And so I wanted to share that that wasn't the case for me. And I think it turned out okay. I did ultimately sort of become a marketer, but it was very accidental. It was very accidental. So to go all the way back, I suppose my career began at around 8 years old when I really felt the weight of my mother's expectation that I would be a doctor, right? And she was very clear on this. And you know what? For the most part, it was great because from the age of 8 till about 18 or 19, when I really changed my mind about that, I enjoyed having that identity. Like I was always introduced that, oh, this is Vicky's son, Jack. He's going to be a doctor, and I'm like 11, right? So no pressure, but it was also kind of cool. And so that is looking back at that, a deep reflection on sort of the value from an identity standpoint that we get or can get from the work that we do. Ultimately, I decided that I didn't want to be a doctor, and I had a first career in finance, in banking. I had a STEM education, pre-med at NYU, didn't become a doctor, as I said, and I gravitated towards finance and banking as a way to sort of stepstone on some stuff that I'd already developed, like quantitative skills, modeling, thinking about systems, etc. And it also gave me a great entree into the world of business and commerce and industry. And so hugely important building block for me from a learning and skills collection standpoint. Ultimately, I realized I didn't love it. There were parts of me that weren't satisfied from that kind of work. And I should say that I didn't have a career plan, but I had a kind of fundamental programming inside me, and I compare that to the programming of the early robots from decades ago, who would face complicated terrains, but were equipped with surprisingly simple, like left, right, back, back 2 steps, left, pivot, and with these simple rules, they could navigate like a very complicated terrain. So for me, those simple rules were, I wanted to love my work. One of the great examples that I had from my mom, I was raised by a single mom. She was a journalist and a columnist for Spanish language newspaper named El Diario in New York. And she loved her work, right? And so I got to see an example very close of what it looks like when someone actually digs and really loves their work. So I credit that example to wanting to love what I did. And the other programming was I wanted to work with the smartest people I could find. But I figured whatever else, whether it worked out or it didn't work out, it seemed to increase the likelihood that I would at least learn at an accelerated rate, right? So that simple programming was all that I observed in my trajectory from I don't love finance so much to hey, I'm going to move to the Bay Area because there some cool people are starting companies that could use maybe some of the skills that sort of I've been building. And so I made my way into growth marketing that way as a quantitative person, as a person who was very excited by problems of behavior, designing user experiences intended to make people do things, buy things, etc. I found those problems fascinating. I loved them, right? And so that is what got me to that work. And, oh, and by the way, you're in marketing now. Cool. Great. Now I know what to call myself. But it was a complete accident, right? And so I wanted to, and in that trajectory, I guess the other programming that I might have picked up along the way is that, let's say at a certain point you've gotten credit enough times for doing a certain kind of work that you become more valuable and you gain more power in terms of being able to go to work for kinds of companies. And so when that started to happen for me, the other thing that became very important was purpose, right? And that is that I wanted to enjoy my work, but I also wanted it to be significant. And so that is a great convergence to the genesis of Oyster with my co-founder, Tony Jamis, where we both came at that with a vision for evolving how we work. This is pre-pandemic. We were both very excited by a future where technology and would continue to make us all more productive as individual people, as organizations, but also become more human-centric, right? So there's a bunch of philosophies, let's say, to be drawn from that bundle of things into the future of work, et cetera. The other piece was we were excited to reject the assumption that an organization can either be about profit and revenue or it can be about positive impact. That's the historical narrative, that these things are like oil and water, that they don't come together. So we were excited to reject that. And that is the lens through which we saw the incredible Oyster opportunity, which gives us a way to bring business model into alignment with impact. I'd love to expound on that, but let me stop there and answer to the tell us about your career question.
Well, one thing I just want to, it's so interesting. You're the third person I've spoken to in the last week whose parents wanted them to be a doctor and they went into something else, which is really bizarre. One was
it's a common thing. It's one of the top things.
Is it? Because like one was like now he's the CEO of KPMG. The other is like a vice chair at PwC. Both were supposed to be doctors. Like your parents put upon them, or you're going to be like just your story. You're going to be the doctor, and both of them like, I don't really want to do this. But they had to do something.
Maybe it's an immigrant thing, because let's say immigrants have a narrower sense of what the good jobs are, right? And I think certainly that was the case for my mother, where she didn't know about stockbroker or software developer, right? And so that
she probably knew doctor, lawyer, like just the basic.
Engineering, right? Let's say that would have been the list. But yeah, it is interesting, and I certainly reflect a lot on how that influenced my early thinking about identity vis-a-vis, what you do for a living.
What really blows me away, Jack, speaking to the two Aarons in your organization and, writing about your company, it seemed to happen so quickly. Only in a few years, you went from, I guess, just the beginning, nothing, to billion plus valuation. How did I don't want to ask what's the secret sauce, but how did it go so quickly?
Well,
and in a weird time period too.
The weirdness of the time period is not an in spite of, it's partly the because, it's significantly the because. And so the changes of the world, the nature of the disruption, the acceleration of remote work, the acceleration of asking questions about, the future of work, all of that was dramatically accelerated by the post-pandemic, the disruption to the world of work, et cetera. And so for us, it was very much like two founders dragging their little sailboat of a startup into the water for the first time, when, oh my goodness, it looks like the storm of the millennium is brewing on the horizon. And so if you're a sailor, with wind can be amazing, but it can also be incredibly destructive. So where I give us credit is, if you're not careful, you can be dashed apart, right? And that certainly could have happened, because there was such a magnitude of demand and of interest in these services. If we hadn't been ready as an organization, relative to the commitments that we made, I think we could have been overwhelmed as an organization. So where I think we got it right is in finding the right way to execute against these unprecedented circumstances, where you had everything from companies where everybody went from being together in a London office to being distributed in 8 European countries, and all of a sudden those companies need a way to handle compliant payroll and contracts for that. And that's just one of the use cases. There are many that involve global employment that have been accelerated over the last couple of years. So like I said, it's very much the because, not the in spite of for us. The dramatic acceleration of remote work, focus on new needs in organizations to handle the challenges of compliant global employment. All of a sudden, that created a radically high, radically new demand for these services relative to the pre-pandemic.
And Jack, maybe we should have set this up a little for the audience. So I'll just say, from my limited understanding, is that the company Oyster HR that you built is really to make it to enable and empower companies to have workers work across the globe wherever they want. So people who maybe are in certain locations and they feel trapped, that they can't go to Silicon Valley or New York City, right, or what have you. So it opens up the door to now they could seek out opportunities wherever. And I guess and this is what you're alluding to, by the pandemic and remote work, that became just your right time, right place. Does that make sense?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, to a miraculous degree that no one can take credit for, who benefited from those events. I Googled in the early pandemic, it was like April of 2020, silver linings. I wanted a quote for silver linings, and I found this quote from a poet named Tuli Kupferberg, and he wrote in a line of one of his poems that when patterns are broken, new worlds emerge. And so I think macro, I draw a lot of encouragement from the fact that it looks like this dramatic disruption across so many of our different systems, the world of work being one of the most affected, has given us an opportunity to do a lot of things better than we did in the past. And that relates to how we work. As an example, there's a lot to talk about there. The other example being, as I said, how we create and operate companies with positive impact in mind. But I want to say that as regards what we see as our opportunity, there's a shift right now amongst companies that have realized that the opportunity to evolve how they work is real. They believe in the productivity gains of of distributed work, of remote work, of things like asynchronous communication. And they've also become, you might say, HR has been waiting for this opportunity for a very long time, which is the realization finally that, we've been saying that people are a company's greatest assets, but I think it took the pandemic to make us understand the depth of that. And it also forced an understanding that, hey, guess what? Who's in charge of this? It's of course it's HR. They are the custodians not only of the employee experience, but also of how an organization takes care of its people. And so as we have all kinds of companies of all different sizes who are looking at the world's talent, let's say, with maybe that's not so hard. Maybe we're really excited about the diversity potential of being able to hire in say dozens of countries. And we're also interested in making ourselves attractive as an employer by offering a certain quality of experience. Because of course, the ability to pay people you never meet who live in other countries, that's not the innovation, right? That is not the innovation. The innovation is for employers that are interested in offering a standard of employment as a way to make themselves attractive in now a global talent market, where it's no longer enough just to put up a website and say, hey, I have some software engineer jobs, here they come. We no longer live in that world, right? And so employers have to make themselves attractive to the talent of the world. So our I think most profound promise to customers is that we are the platform that allows them to tap the global talent pool, make themselves attractive as an employer with things like the experience of the employee, with things like knowledge of what equitable compensation looks like in a certain country for a certain position of a certain seniority, the ability to confer equity where possible in compliance. So that is our purpose. That is what we do as the service that we offer. Our mission is that some of those people that these companies hire should be in, let's call it, the developing world, where historically there has simply been no access to these life-changing knowledge work jobs. And so that's how we bring together business model and impact in what I think is a super unique and super elegant way.
You make this point about impact and being people-centric. And for a job function or a discipline like HR that is all about people, sometimes it can get caught up, or perhaps it's a stereotype, that it's all focused on process, procedures, forms, systems, which seems to be inherently at odds with this kind of people-centric impact or mission that you have. How are you and Oyster kind of tackling that issue? How are you kind of opening up that people-centric philosophy to more companies and kind of more professions around the world?
Fantastic question. The answer is some companies are waking up to this by themselves, right? But let's say there's a lot of inertia in the HR function across, let's say, greater industry business that will take some time to transform. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that we're in the midst of a renaissance of HR. We can remember not so long ago when IT, the function, was derided and made fun of and characterized by the guy with the pocket protector with the 8 pens and the tape. And he would fumble lamely under your desk for a few minutes and produce no effect. So given the advent of the cloud and data, suddenly that function is dramatically enlarged in the value, the perceived value, and the actual value that they're bringing to the organization. They have a seat at the table, as it were, and from a what we think IT is standpoint, our minds are completely different. Similarly, Oyster, as you say, sorry, HR, as you say, is leaving behind this history of, let's say, being the antithesis of human centricity, right? I mean, being the party's attendant at some of the most awkward, uncomfortable moments that like employees face, let's say, the farthest thing. And I think that owes a lot to, and there's a lot of HR philosophy to consume, and there are folks that have been describing this problem, this tension for a long time. But let's say generally that HR has been what it is, not through the fault of HR practitioners, but through the force and the constraints that is imposed by, let's say, the greater corporate context, which actually, is not about elevating human beings, but kind of the opposite, commoditizing them. Not, and I speak very sweepingly. I think we're much improved from decades ago, but generally speaking, we're on a journey where the corporate interests are being brought into a different balance with the interests of the employees. And you can look back at the labor unions of the middle of the prior century as necessary evolution. So we're still on that journey, and HR has been, let's say, under the constraints. And so I think what's exciting now is that some companies, hopefully a lot, and hopefully more and more, are realizing that the way to win is actually human centricity, and to elevate these things that in the post-pandemic world, in a post-values shift world, where both consumers and employees are bringing new judgment to bear on the companies that they buy from and go work for, that this is a part of what is necessary going forward. And so, to answer your question, finally, we believe in that trend, and so we're very passionately talking to the companies that are already on this bandwagon. And let's say more gently, from a have you thought about it this way standpoint, we're working with other companies who may be need further nudging along on their journey. But the great news is that I think there are more and more HR leaders at more and more companies whose light bulb is lit, and who are trying to make this happen, who are trying to make human centricity much as important as it needs to be, for the rest of this decade.
I mean, when you talk about human centricity, does it go over the heads of some people just because it seems like
Sure. What
too
is
like
it?
pie in the
Yeah,
sky? Right.
exactly.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
how do you make that case? Like, can you like convince the cynics that are out there that, some folks that are listening to this podcast, they might not have had the best experiences
Oh,
with
wait,
like
wait. I'm a
HR.
cynic, so yeah, put me in there because I see this every day, that
Yeah.
how
Let
employees
me
are
give
feeling
you
miserable and job seekers feeling miserable. So yeah.
let me give you a clear example. Um, when we were first getting started, it was like right at the beginning of the pandemic, and even though the world is where it was, we were hiring people for the very first time, trying to secure additional investment, and generally take those early steps as an organization that at the very earliest beginnings, hiring its first people. And so, because we didn't have an office, and I should say, Oyster was committed to not having an office before the pandemic made it popular. We were ready. We were on that train. We were fans of like GitLab and Automatic and Buffer and all the other companies that before the pandemic had been saying this is amazing. So we were on that train anyway. And then the world changed, and everybody was on that train. But we felt very insecure about our onboarding. Like how when you start you work for a company at an office, maybe there's like they've decorated your booth area, you have lunch with the team, and who knows, there's a cake, etc. Welcome Jack. There's all these kinds of things that are part of the office inertia, the way we understand the office, that are just not there. And so we put a lot of thought and deliberateness into the onboarding process. We asked ourselves, how do we make people feel special, in ways that are not, they're very unlike, the cake and the team lunch, but can be as cool and as memorable. And so we have iterated our onboarding process I think as much as any software company has iterated its process in the last 4 years, it is a thing of beauty, right? Insofar as all the ways in which it anticipates the needs, both emotional and functional, of a person arriving into the organization. Now, this is something that we did out of necessity because because we don't have an office. But the general example is become deliberate about the ownership of the employee experience from beginning all the way through to, let's say, peak engagement, right? And that's not something that, like, I think HR has really been tasked with, or had the ability to try to construct. Because one of the things about the office is you didn't need instructions. You show up, you know how it works. Oh, I sit here, my boss is there, the meeting is over there. But without the office, everything has to be made up. And so what the takeaway there is that whether you work at the office, whether you're hybrid, or whether you're fully remote, empower HR to take ownership of the employee experience. And in there, the elevation of human centricity with things like, hey, let's think blank sheet of paper from a first principle standpoint. All the ways in which we could make a person feel unanxious and welcome, in their first day at a 600 person company that has no offices. Like, no, that won't be overwhelming, right? And so I think really it is a matter of shifting perspective and asking ourselves the questions that treat our employees as fully dimensional human beings, who are not just their resumes, who are not just their demographics, who are everyday living dynamic lives with events that influence how they work, et cetera. What being a caregiver, for example, knowing that about someone, knowing that someone, let's say, has disproportionate economic responsibility because they have kind of an extended family. I mean, that is what human centricity means. These are the things that need to be sort of thought about, and that HR needs to be concerned with at a human-centric organization, I believe.
Yeah, Jack, I would love to hear kind of what you do, because from my perspective, I've been running a search firm for 25 years, and there's such like anger, animosity, trepidation, where when they're looking to onboard somebody, even from getting an offer, they're saying, okay, Rick, we're going to give you an offer. We're going to send it out to Friday. So you're like waiting for Friday. Friday comes, Friday goes. Now it's Monday. Now it's Tuesday. Where's my offer? Then maybe they're looking for, we have to do a background check. Okay, that seems reasonable. Day goes by, week goes by, month goes by. What do I do? Am I hired? Am I not hired? It really is very dysfunctional. And this is not a generalization. I hear this from people all the time, and it's so frustrating to them because you get so excited. Hey, I got a job. This is great. I got the offer. But then you feel there's no man woman zone. Like, well, what's happening? Do they renege? I'm not hearing from anybody. They're not communicating.
It's awful.
They're not sending an email or like an email or text or something. Say, okay, hey, there's a little bit of a glitch. Here's what we're doing. Sorry about that. Or Joe was out of the office, so he couldn't sign off of that, and Jane had to do this. But it's such from the outside perspective, what you might think should be a straightforward program bringing somebody aboard is like terrifying to some people. It's nerve-wracking.
Talent acquisition is, and no disrespect to the wonderful practitioners. It is not their fault. They are working in a system, and they're working against inertia. But I think that if I were to try to simplify it as much as possible for someone, say, who's unconvinced yet, I would say you need to think about the people that you want to hire as passionately and with as much interest as you think about your customers. How you acquire them, how you keep them, how you politely decline the ones that don't become your customers so that they don't speak ill in the world against you. That I think is a big light bulb that needs to go off at the highest level, and I think it needs to be a CEO down thing that is understood, that that companies need to do this very differently than they have in the past. Let's say it comes from a commitment to wanting to distinguish your organization as a great place to work, right? This is the fame that you want to have in the world, right? And so that, I think, as a part of it, requires a ground up reinvention of how you bring people in, how you write job descriptions, right? As I said earlier, it is far harder than putting stuff up on your website or on LinkedIn and expecting the candidates of your dreams, or even any candidates, to find you. It's a different world, right? And so it's broken, it's dysfunctional. The answer is, think about the people you want to hire the same way, or even more passionately than the way you think about your customers.
So is that kind of what you're working on with Oyster, where, as you mentioned, like first principles, to say, here's the job description and let's be transparent about it. Everything. See, I would love to see this. Let me give you, I don't think this will happen, but I just throw this out just for food for thought. How great would it be if you have a job description where you could actually talk about the person with whom you're going to work for? What's their idiosyncrasies, what's a little bit about them. So, going in, just like they, ask you all the questions. So, about everything. Salary transparency, and not only just the salary bonus, equity options, what have you. What's the likelihood
when you're
of
thinking
downsizing?
when you're thinking like this is marketing.
Yeah.
When you put the marketing hat on and you're thinking, what are the things that I need to do to find this person? You're thinking about a customer this way, but amazing changes happen when you think about the people you want to hire. Yes, suddenly a job description becomes a very different kind of document, right? When you flip the perspective that way, suddenly the interview experience becomes very different when an organization is as concerned and as interested in that optimal outcome as they are when it is a prospect in the pipeline, right?
Right, because how many times do you see? I don't know if you go on LinkedIn or other sites or Twitter X. One of the biggest things drive people crazy is that you go on an interview and go meet with 3-6 people. Let's say you're a mid to senior level, professional. 3-6+ people, maybe have to do a project, maybe have to do whatever, and then ghosted, and then you never hear back, and then the person's like, what just happened here? I thought this was going well, and nothing.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that we're on an improving trend, where I think more and more the talent acquisition function will understand and acknowledge that, and the penalty of those offenses will be significant. Let's say in terms of reputation. I think so. I believe that's the trend we're on. But I am surprised to hear stories about that kind of thing. During recent tech layoffs, etc. I thought we had become kinder collectively than some, and maybe you just hear the worst stories, right? Maybe like I said, I'm hopeful, but yes, I am saddened that we continue to see examples where folks who are looking for employment, who are, and I remember what that was like, when you're on the other end of that email or that phone call on which, everything depends, and what kind of a weekend am I going to have, right? That kind of anxiety. And so I think that the most successful companies are going to be the ones that are the most human-centric, and human centricity will dictate new behaviors, around that sort of thing.
Well, for you, that's great, Jack, because you have, since you're still, early on, relatively speaking, compared to companies that have been around forever, that to look around and say, hey, I don't want to do what they did, because this is what I'm hearing from guys like Jack and others. So we're going to do the opposite. Because if you do the opposite, they're going to want to work for your company, because they can say, hey, they treat me well. They treat me with respect and dignity and courtesy. If I have a choice, I'm going to go to Oyster and Jack, So I think that's a differentiator in the marketplace.
It has been,
right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we're certainly, I would say, an example of success there. We've presented a lot of transparency and human centricity in the employment experience that we're promising to folks that are joining the organization. And that, together with the fact that we have no geographic constraints on where we can hire, I think those things together have been incredible for us. Incredible. Yeah.
Can you give us a sneak peek? Because Unity, Jack has alluded to this, 3 years, $1 billion plus unicorn valuation, 500 employees around the world. Can you give us a preview into how you hire for your team, what candidates should expect, and how they can stand out if they're going through the interview process with you all?
Sure. So we put a high value on communications. We, for example, embrace asynchronous communications as an organization, which puts a significant expectation on writing abilities. Writing is, say, more important at Oyster. I think writing is important everywhere you do knowledge work. But let's say it's differently important at Oyster because of the focus that we put on asynchronous communication. Not everybody can make a meeting, et cetera. And so we have some innovative previews as part of the candidate process that allow them to present themselves like via Loom, right? So that they can, we give them like a Loom to record so that Loom can be shared with different people throughout the organization. And people, say, who can't all attend a live interview can get to know the candidate. For example, we provide extensive resources around the employment experience at Oyster. Like, it's all very clear. You really sort of have a very, very clear sense of how Oyster works, even how your team works as part of the pre-joining process. So those are some of the ways I think that we do it differently.
Got it. And so I suspect, as you're going through the process, as you're maybe completing the interviews or recording your Loom, it probably should be very important kind of understanding how your experience or how your interests match up with kind of the mission of being people-centric, or how you kind of demonstrate that service orientation.
Yeah. Another great question. Because we are so mission driven, because we place such an emphasis, such a passionate emphasis on our mission, it gives us a way to connect with people that is different, right? Let's say then companies that don't have that. And so when we feel that connection, and it does happen, sometimes it doesn't happen, but when it does happen, it is a very special signal, of let's say likely success at Oyster in particular, that is, I think, different than it's not a signal companies, lots of companies have. And by that I mean that a passionate connection to the mission can absolutely become a success factor at Oyster. Of course, it may not redress other skills that need to be attached to this particular job, but it is a factor we have learned to weight, because we've seen people go on and be very successful who have that connection at the door.
And you're a B Corp.
Yes.
This guy, right? B Corp. So the
Yes.
whole, the whole
Yes.
ethos, and you're actually tied to how, being a public kind of service impact company, right?
Yes. A B Corp is, we're very proud of our B Corp.
Rick is looking at me like, hey, how did Jack know that?
There's Google, and Jack is also smart and possessed of many facts from diverse domains. So in this time of many companies wanting to do it better, do it right, it becomes important for there to be standards and guidelines. And so we embrace B Corp as such a standard that we think it is important to create some behavioral guidance, some governance guidance for companies that are trying to have a positive impact in the world. So we embrace it as an important standard from that standpoint. But to your earlier commentary on our unicorn status, the number of companies that are a B Corp and unicorn is very, very tiny. Less
None.
than 20,
Wow.
less than 20 in the world ever. And we're very proud of that. But I think the most exciting thing that signals, I think, is to all those people. Let's say, let's sidebar a minute on the recent super intense political discourse that we've had on the question of ESG in the investment world. We have some folks that are very, very passionately against there being any consideration of positive impact in investment philosophies, and we know that that's coming largely from those industries that don't want to lose their access to capital because their, let's say, bad behavior or negative impact is so insurmountable. So, but there are people who believe that positive impact and commercial success not only can come together. So on one side we have folks who say those things can't combine. Get your ESG, get your woke out of my investment philosophy. I'm focused on maximizing profits. The people that are saying that those things are like oil and water, they can't mix. There's some other people in the investment community that are saying, hey, no, you know what? We believe that those things actually can mix. And so what I'm happiest about our B Corp plus unicorn status is to serve as an example that those things can absolutely come together like oil and water in a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of way.
Wow. I I really appreciate that perspective, right? Because I think, especially with the blind community, a lot of professionals really over-index or over-optimize on trying to make the most amount of money possible, or trying to like climb the career ladder as quickly and get those rack up those promotions and job levels. But if you take a step back, one common theme that we've heard from some of these like high powered executives like yourself that come on the show is, if you start from first principles and really think about the mission or your own kind of professional development needs, the money, the careers, the promotions will actually follow. And I really appreciate Oyster putting it really front and center in the hiring and what you're doing in terms of saying, hey, we're actually here to do some common good. We're going to be darn good at it, right? Because obviously there's a skills component to our interview process, and that's how we're going to, be effective for our clients and our customer base. But I think what I'm trying to say is, why do you think your approach or this approach is so rare, just generally in the industry or just generally among professionals that are seeking these kind of roles?
Right. So to comment on this oil and water thing,
Yes.
bringing together a positive impact and commercial success in one organization. The reason that's a novel idea is simply historical inertia. Corporations evolved to optimize certain things, and while I think the corporation is an amazing vehicle for progress and the deployment of capital to build cool things, if not necessarily solve the world's problems, there's opportunity for improvement of the model, right? And so because that requires new thinking, right? Simply put, there's friction and there's resistance, and this is why it's going to be challenging. But this is why I think holding up examples more and more of companies that are showing materially their positive impact in the world, and also showing how their commitment to doing that has become a success factor. I think we're going to see more of that. We're just going to continue to see more and more of that in this values shifted post-pandemic world, where, as I said, people are choosing who they buy from and who they work for with different criteria than in the past.
No, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because there clearly is that demand there from professionals who are looking for those types of roles, certainly from customers that are seeking out certified B corporations, companies that are pledging to put the common good first. Um, it really is there, right? There clearly are people that care about it, and you could do damn well good if you cater
Yeah.
to those people.
Yes, and one negative of, let's say, all kinds of companies becoming interested in branding themselves this way is that there's going to be a lot of noise, and it's going to become difficult to actually discern the hyperbole or the straight up misinformation or deception from companies that are doing it right. So this is why we have all of these self-imposed rigors. B Corp certification is one. Our annual impact report is another self-imposed rigor where we're sharing very transparently, very explicitly our performance in terms of impact. And I should say that for folks that are interested in that sort of thing, and by that I mean ESG/impact and reporting, an innovation that we came up with at Oyster that I think is worth sharing is that we break down our impact into two domains. One of them is internal, and the other is external. Internal is what most companies think of as ESG, which is the effect of the organization itself, the people employed by the company, its environmental footprint, which contrasts with its diversity, its transparency, its governance, et cetera. That basket of things is what we call internal impact. The other impact domain, external, is what we also call business model impact. And so the idea there is that we want Oyster is an example of a business whose business model produces measurable positive impact in the form of people hired and paid in emerging economies. It's very easy to see that impact. For us, it's about 30%. 30% of the people on the Oyster platform are in the emerging world. And so that's a very clear indicator of, say, the overall efficiency of our business model in generating impact. That perspective, I think, is available to all kinds of businesses who have the opportunity to connect some dots between their business model and measurable positive impact. That could be social positive impact, as it is, largely for us. We're focused on the problems of economic inequality, but those dots could also connect to environmental issues. We know that the world is filled with global scale problems, racial inequality, gender inequality, economic inequality, et cetera. The list goes on. And so what we're hoping to do, what I'm passionately hoping to do, is to turn on more entrepreneurs to this idea of designing businesses with business models that have some intrinsic capacity to deliver positive impact. Like I said, for us, you might say it's 30%. For other businesses, it might be 5%. But if all businesses embrace this way of thinking and they define impact, not in arbitrary ways, like we want to send, flowers, to this country because it's lovely. No, if we use acknowledged references like the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, for example, right, of which there are fewer than 20, and they're all really, really, really important. Imagine what entrepreneurship looks like if we start thinking about the companies that we create with global scale business problems in mind, and design business models that are intended to attack them. So that's the macro, that's the template that I would really love to shout about, from the rooftops.
No, I appreciate that insight and kind of your passion for this kind of work. It's really been enlightening. Thank you, Jack, for coming on the
Thank
show.
you. Thank you so much,
Thanks, Jack.
Rick and Jack. Such a pleasure.